And level one is fundamentals, and it starts with who you are. And the reason we start with who you are is because you are the foundation of everything that you want to have. And so there's a thing of me. And the building blocks of who you are first, the knowledge that you have, the things you know about. Second, the skills you know how to do. Third, the motivation to actually do them. And fourth, the environment to make it easy. So the first pillar of this is knowledge. In order to become a millionaire, the first thing we have to do is know what a millionaire even is to begin with. A millionaire means that you have over $1 million in investable assets, liquid, minus your house. So your primary residence is actually excluded from this. Now, I'll give you a fun fact that you probably don't know. 1 out of 9 Americans is a millionaire. And the thing that separates the people who are the millionaires from everybody else is what they know exists. And if you're like, who are you to even say this? My name is Alex Hormozi. I'm at acquisition.com. Our portfolio of companies does over $250 million a year. And since 2016, every single business I've ever started has gone to over $10 million a year. And we have 3 companies that are worth over $100 million plus. So the reason that rich kids, for example, have an advantage over poor kids is because rich kids have parents who tell them about opportunities that exist that get better returns on their time. If you don't know private equity exists, you sure as hell aren't going to get into it. If you don't know that you can become an investment banker and sell companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars and get percentages of companies that you didn't even found and take on no risk, then you're not going to pursue it. And so I make these videos so that you can know things that you might not naturally have around you or anyone in your surrounding area who knows that these things exist. And to give you some context, I was 22 when I started this journey and ultimately quit my job before I ended up starting my first business. When I did go to quit my job, I emailed a bunch of different gym owners because I figured I wanted to get into fitness because it was something I was into. And only one of them got back to me. And that gym owner was a business owner and he was making money. And so I moved out to California, I changed my environment so that I could be around this guy. And this guy helped me learn the ropes and taught me about my first business, which was opening a gym. And it was only after learning and paying for consulting for a gym business that I didn't have that I felt comfortable enough to begin on my own. So the second component of knowing who you are the skills you have. These are the things that you do. And so what can be really deceiving about this is people say, hey, I want to be confident. I want to be charismatic. I want to be good on camera. But they make it seem as though it's a trait. So a trait isn't a real thing. What it really is a bundle of skills. So let's say if you wanted to learn the skill of sales. And so underneath of sales, we may have being able to actively listen, being able to repeat back what someone says, nodding and keeping eye contact, being able to shake a hand firmly, walking into a room and being able to project your voice, being able to have reasoned arguments with someone if they have some fallacy that they believe that you can help them overcome. All of these are sub-skills that if someone exhibits all of them, someone say, he's a good salesman. Now, if you have this first level skill, you can usually become a millionaire literally with just that. But then, fundamentally, if you want to level up, you can learn marketing. And marketing is basically sales done one-to-many. And so all the things that you learn how to do one-on-one, you start projecting to large amounts of people. And so this is just sales at scale. And so underneath of marketing, you would also have to understand media, so where your communication is happening. You'd want to understand headlines because that's going to be the first line of communication. You'd probably have to learn something about web pages, and you'd have to learn conversion, right? These are all sub-skills underneath of marketing that would make you a good marketer. Now, if you know sales and marketing, then you know acquisition, because that means that you can completely acquire customers. And so each of these skills stacks on top of one another and makes all of the skills retroactively more valuable. So the more you learn, the better you get, the more you get. And so the path to becoming the person who can make the first million is predicated on the knowledge you have about the world so that you pursue the right path to get the skills within. And so, sure, it's just as hard to learn how to pack boxes in a warehouse, probably, as it is to learn how to do sales. They take about the same amount of time to learn. This one just has significantly higher returns. And so this is where the knowledge shows you where to orient your effort so you get the highest returns back on the skills you learn. So now let's talk about motivation, my tiny little box of motivation. And so motivation fundamentally comes from deprivation. It's from what you don't have that creates the action or urgency around acting in general. And so, for example, if I'm sleepy, I'm motivated to sleep. If I'm hungry, I'm motivated to eat. And so right now, if you're motivated to become a millionaire, it's because you lack $1 million. One of the easiest ways to become more motivated in money rather than physiological stuff like hunger, sleep, whatever, is to surround yourself with people who make significantly more money. Now, immediately you're like, wait a second, I don't know anybody who's a millionaire. Of course you don't. But you may be able to create a reference group that you compare yourself to who are millionaires. And so for me, for example, when I had my job in Baltimore, which is what I left to become an entrepreneur and start my first business, most people were just like, this is a terrible idea. Why would you throw away your college years? Why would you throw away this good job that you have that's steady and stable and looks good on paper and sounds good at cocktail parties? And it was because I hated it. And at some point I realized that basically everyone except for one guy that I kind of knew, who we talk about our entrepreneurial dreams together, all of them thought this was a bad idea. And so at some point, this is where high agency or high self-belief has to become more important. Your belief about yourself has to be more important than what other people say about you. And so this is a perfect segue to my second tiny little box, environment. And so think about your environment as friction or a lubricant on your goals. And so if you want to change someone's behavior, you change their environment. So let me give you a really simple example of this. I can guarantee you that I can get every single person in a building to take their clothes off. How could I do that? I could do that by locking the doors. That's one change to the environment. Second, putting them all together in one room. Second change to the environment. Third, cranking the heat until it's 200 degrees. Eventually, everyone would strip down because it would be so hot in there. And so you are that little rat in the experiment, and you want to create the box around you that lubricates the activities that you want to do. And so fundamentally, what you want to think about is, how do I make it as easy as possible to work as hard as I can? And then how do I eliminate everything else that distracts me from my goals? More specifically, how do I eliminate everything that distracts me from doing the stuff that gets me the skills that takes me towards my goals? And so that means that it could be people, it could be software, it could be alcohol. If you just simply put this as your filter, thinking, does this increase or decrease the likelihood that I hit my goals? Cut out everything that decreases the likelihood that hit your goals, because sometimes that's easier to see. And then all that you'll be left with is nothing and time and the ability to learn and act. I've talked about something that I call the season of no, which I've entered multiple times in my career as an entrepreneur, which is basically where you're not successful enough to be in the group of friends that you want to be in, but you want to have a completely different lifestyle than the people you're currently with. And so you basically just have to say no to everything. And that means that you're saying no to the social gatherings because you know none of those people there have the goals that you want and none of them understand what you want to do. It's saying no to the distractions and no to the entertainment that you do normally because you know that that's not going to increase the likelihood that you hit your goal. So for me, I gave up fantasy football. I gave up drinking with the boys. I gave up going out. I gave up really just like friend gatherings in general. And so the only thing that I did was I worked and then I went home at 5 and then I worked from 5 to 9. And so I'd work 5 to 9 in the morning, go to work 5 to 9 again at night. And so I had 8 hours of time that I could work on me and what I wanted to do next. And 5 to 9 or 9 to 5 that I worked in the middle of the day, that was basically how I paid my bills. And if you're like, wait, there was no time. Yes, there was no time. I didn't have a girlfriend. I wasn't going out to the movies, right? Like it was just 100% focused on removing everything that wasn't getting me close to where I wanted to go. And if you're like, wow, this makes me a weirdo. Yes, it makes you odd. And if you expect to be normal and achieve odd and outlier results, good luck. So we've just covered who you are and you made a little bit of money. And the next step is figuring out who to sell to. And I want to make this really real for you. And so a lot of people think that to make $1 million, you got to sell 10,000 people something for $100, right? And that would be $1 million, right? That's what that equals. But it's way easier to just sell 100 people something that costs $10,000, which also equals $1 million. And so believe me, finding 100 people, way easier than finding 10,000. And so the real problem that you're solving is, what do I have that's worth $10,000? Well, the thing is they also don't have to pay you now. This can be split over 4 years, right? Which would then be $2,500 a year, which is now $200 per month. And for you to acquire the 100 customers, you're talking about 2 people per week. which is not that hard. And if you're reaching out to 100 people per day, then you getting 2 out of 700 people to be willing to spend $200 a month with you, all of a sudden, this $1 million goal becomes a lot more real. If you're trying to figure out who to focus on for these 2 people a week that you're selling to, that's what I'm gonna cover right now. You have 3 basic circles that I've identified from all the entrepreneurs that I've talked to. Number 1 is that you help someone who is like you overcome something that you overcame in the past. And so that's typically some sort of painful thing or some sort of problem you figured out a solution to, and then you operationalize that for other people. The second is something that you're just very passionate about. So it's like you're really into this thing, and then you help other people get into that thing too. The third is some sort of professional skill. And so that's like, oh, I used to do accounting or bookkeeping for this business, or I used to do building management, or I used to do property management, like whatever it is, you have some sort of skill that you learn in the professional marketplace that you help other people do. And so all of those things, those 3 Ps, pain, passion, profession, are the 3 fundamentals that I look at in terms of trying to pick the who. So pain, passion, profession. Underneath of this, if you're like, okay, where do I want to start? The reason that I like helping fewer people rather than more people in the beginning is because you don't have money and you don't have resources. And so if you're going to start a business, you might as well start with fewer people that pay you more because it's easier to run that business. And so I like to use the old Tesla analogy here, which is when Tesla started, he wasn't trying to bring in the Model 3 into mass market. He started with the Roadster, which was the most expensive version of the car because he knew that the fewest amount of people would be able to afford it. The other thing that this does is it actually positions you at the top of the marketplace. Then he moved down market and created the Model S, which was now a $120,000 car. Then he went and got the Model X, and then he had the Model 3, and then he has the Cybertruck, which I think is Y. Anyways, the point here is that he basically worked his way down and went broader and broader and broader market as he continued to get resources and be able to redeploy them into broader and broader parts of the marketplace. And so for you, you're gonna probably pick what pain, passion, or profession you're gonna go to. You're gonna start with the smallest version of that market that you can, the most specific, the closest to who you can help the most. And so I will give you this third little piece here, which is, if you're for some reason split between 2 of these, like, well, I like this and I also overcame this thing, help the person that you can provide the most value to. Now, if you're like, okay, I can help this poor person go up by $10 and I can help this rich person go up by $100,000, then in a real way, that $100,000 is a representation of how much value you can provide that person, meaning go do that one first. Now, once you've identified, okay, I'm gonna start with a niche, I'm gonna pick one of these 3 Ps, then you run them through these filters that I have. Is that number 1, you want them to have the problem to solve. Now, all of these things fundamentally are problems, right? There's not enough information about this passion, there's not enough information about this pain, or there's not enough information about this profession they want to learn. But fundamentally, all of those are the problem. So you have to have a problem that you're trying to solve, and the people you're trying to sell to need to have that problem. Number 2 is they have to have the money to spend. If they don't have the money to spend, but they got the problem, then you don't have a business around it. You got a nonprofit, which is not the point of this video. This is about making money. Underneath of this problem to solve, you want them to have the urgency to solve it now. So this can't be something that they're like, oh, that would be nice. It has to be something that they want to solve right now, because this will overcome all of the people who are like, I'm going to think about it. They keep pushing it off. If you have cancer and somebody has a cancer treatment, you want it now. Now, on the money side, you also want them to have the authority to spend it. So you want them to be the one, ideally, who's the principal, who's the one who makes the decision about the implementation that you're gonna help them with. And I wanna be really clear, I use these as thought exercises to help you get started and pick the who that you're going to serve. But at the end of the day, if I had to boil all of this down, it just comes down to this one truth, which is that you want to serve the person that you can provide the most value to. I'll tell you that A16Z, Y Combinator, etc., they have one rule that they learned in years, which I will share with you, is that they now only invest in founders who already have experience with the problem. And I define problem very broadly here, that you have overcome this sort of difficulty and you've lived with the problem for 5+ years. If you've lived with it, then you intimately understand it, because that means that you'll also intimately understand the prospect that you want to sell to. And so it kind of is like this hack for already knowing what their thoughts and dreams are, what the pains that they're experiencing, how they talk, the words they use. So it's kind of this big time warp of saying, oh, I already spent the last years of my life living being me. If I can sell to people who are just like me, then I don't need to do 5 years of studying and figuring this out. And so for me, I had struggled getting into shape. That was my problem. I was not jacked enough. And so then I spent all my time learning about it so that I could become more jacked, so much so that I annoyed everyone at work enough that they were like, please quit this and start something fitness related. And so for me, that was the perfect first pick. Now, I was between SAT prep, and why was that? Because I had been pretty good at test prep. I tested pretty well, and I'd gone through a process of improving my own scores, and I was like, oh, I could probably help other people improve their scores too. The other thing that I was considering was frozen yogurt, because I actually really liked froyo at the time. This is before frozen yogurt boomed, and so actually was, kudos to young Alex. It was actually not a terrible time to get into frozen yogurt. And so fundamentally, it's like I had two things I was passionate about, or pain. These are really just equal sides of the same thing, right? It was a pain, and then I became passionate about it when I solved it. SAT, froyo, gym. And so actually all three of these were in this pain/passion bucket. And I chose to start the gym because frozen yogurt cost 150 grand to open, which I didn't have. Then it was really just between SAT prep and fitness. And I actually started on the SAT prep path first, and then I was gonna partner with someone, and then I'll just say it ended poorly. And because of that kind of negative experience, and I wasn't emotionally mature enough, I said, fine, I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna do fitness. So it was kind of like a process of elimination. I couldn't do yoga because I didn't have the money. I felt like I got burned on my SAT prep thing. And so then I just ended up with, well, I guess I'll just do fitness. And so the only disclaimer that I have about all of this stuff that I just covered, so this is my warning, right? This is my warning call for you, is that you wanna make sure that you're going to be in a market that's at least flat or growing. You don't want to get into a market that's shrinking. And so if I wanted to get into retirement homes for old folks, that's a growing market. That's a good thing. And so if you had just recently placed your grandmother and it was a pain process for you, and then you figured out how to do it in a way that was really smart and efficient, then you could provide that solution to other people who are in the exact same position as you. And it's probably urgent, and they have the money and authority to do it. You just don't want to get into selling print newspapers today. So we've covered who you are, who to sell to, and you've made a little bit more money. And now we talk about what to sell. So there's 4 elements that I like to have in every product that I sell. Number 1 is that it's unique. And the reason for that is because I don't want anyone else to be able to sell it. The second is that it's expensive, because expensive stuff makes you more money per unit. Third is that I want it to be sticky. I want it to be things that people don't just buy once, but keep buying again and again. And the fourth is I want it to be air. So unique, expensive, sticky air, meaning it's something that doesn't cost me a lot to deliver. And so this is basically the relationship of your gross profit. It means it costs you a penny, you can sell it for $1, and people keep buying it again and again, and no one else can sell it but me. So let me show you a product that everyone's heard of that actually matches all 4 of these. Coca-Cola. It's unique in that no one else knows the recipe for Coca-Cola. It's expensive relative to how much it costs. It might cost a few pennies to put this together. Really, probably the can is the most expensive part of the product itself. And it's sticky in that, literally, if you spill this on the floor, it is sticky. But on top of that is that when people start drinking Coke, they don't stop drinking Coke products for usually their entire lives. Imagine introducing someone to a product and then knowing that they would literally always buy your product. They'd always go to restaurants and order what you had. When they go home, they crack open your thing. When they eat food, they drink your products. That's a great business. So these are all exceptional things for making your first $1 million. Now, if you want to make a gazillion dollars, then you want to add something else to this, which is scale. So if I just need to have 25 clients like I talked about earlier, then I could just do myself, give people time, give people service, give people some skill set and transfer to them. That's unique because no one else can do it because it's just me. I can charge a lot because it's just my time, which is the cost. And if I'm good, people pay again and again and again. And so these, like a normal service business with one really good person meets all 4 of these things. The issue then becomes scale. And so what I'll walk you through is different ways to make any product more scalable. I think that people have a massive misunderstanding about what it even means. So the first part is that it's not, is something scalable or not? It's how scalable is it? So this is really easy to scale, And then this is really hard to scale. And so one-on-one with you is harder to scale than, let's say, me adding another user on School, the software platform. And so everything about scalability has to do with something called the incremental cost of adding a customer. But all that really means is how much cost do we have to incur as a business to bring on one additional customer? The most scalable businesses bring on an additional customer costs almost nothing. Imagine you're a cell phone carrier. If another person signs onto their network of cell phone usage, it doesn't really cost them much at all to add the additional user. If another person comes onto Facebook, it's not that much. If another person comes onto School, it's not that much to add the person. And so all of these things are easier to scale. Now, I will tell you one of the things that's very interesting about very scalable businesses is that typically they're more demand constrained, meaning it's harder to get people to buy that stuff. Whereas there are some businesses that are very hard to scale. Think like a very high service business, so like accounting, for example, is harder to scale because it's hard to find really good accountants and be able to maintain that quality of service at a high level. Scaling a law firm, really hard because it's all about expertise, which means you have to get lots of people in. It takes a really long time to get them good enough, and you always have the risk of them leaving. And so oftentimes very unscalable businesses have partnership structures so that people come in so that they feel like partial owners in that business. But if you're the ultimate original owner, it can be harder for you to scale. Again, there are massive law firms. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, it just means that it's harder. Congrats, you're 1/3 of the way there. And now we move on to level 2. And this is level 2. And we start with get them to buy. And there's 2 steps to this. Step 1 is they have to find out about whatever it is that you sell. And in fact, I wrote an entire book about this thing in $100 million leads, which is getting strangers to want to buy your stuff. All right, this is advertising. The second thing that you do is you get them to buy. So let's start with number 1, find out. So there are 8 things that you can do to let people know about your stuff. The first 4 only you can do. The second 4 are things that other people do on your behalf. These I call the core 4. These I call the 4 lead getters. So these are the only 4 things that one person can do to let other people know about their stuff. So you've got warm outreach, which is letting people who know you know about your stuff. Cold is letting people who don't know you know about your stuff. Then you've got content, which is letting people who know you one-to-many know about your stuff. And then you've got paid ads, which is letting people who don't know you one-to-many know about your stuff. These are the only 4 things that you can do to let someone else know, to force them to find out about whatever it is you have to sell, because they cannot buy it unless they know you exist. Now, if you want to get more leverage, because this is about becoming a millionaire, then you can use these 4 things to get lead getters. Now, the first type of lead getter is a customer. This is the people who you actually get to buy. Now, they can do the core 4 themselves. They can let people they know one-on-one. They can let strangers know one-on-one. They can be in ads for you, or they can make content. That's when they make a review or they make a post talking about how great your stuff is. That lets more people know about it. The next is you've got employees. Employees do the same core 4 as you do on your behalf. So they do warm outreach. They do cold outbound. They make ads for you. They make content on your behalf. The next version of this is affiliates. So affiliates are businesses that already have your customers in their business. And so let's say I have a gym. If I want to get more people to my gym, I can make a deal with a chiropractor. And I can say, hey, I will send you patients when they ding themselves at my gym. And then when you have somebody who wants to lose weight because that's why their back hurts, you can send them to my gym. So that creates a reciprocal relationship between you and another business. And every customer they acquire, they can send to you and vice versa. And the last is agencies. So these are other businesses that specialize typically in one of these. So you've got content agencies, you've got paid ads agencies, you've got outbound agencies, and all of those, you'd still have to start with the core 4 to contact the agency, and then they would use the core 4 to actually advertise. So these are the only things any person can do to let other people know, and these are the types of people that become the targets of the core 4 that can then do it on your behalf. Now, if you're trying to get 25 customers, right, like I talked about, like you only need 25 people to pay you $10,000 a year for 4 years to become a millionaire, okay? So the thing that you have, and that's assuming no taxes, I'm just gonna assume this is an international video, the first thing and the easiest is here, is warm outbound. You just let people know who already know you that you have this thing for sale and that you're willing to help them. One of the easiest offers is, hey, I'll help you for free. So that means I'll put 3 hours or 5 hours of my time to helping you achieve some sort of outcome. And at the end, if you don't mind, I'd love to make you an offer about what it would look to work with me for paid for money in the future. Very simple offer. And the thing is when you offer 2, 3, 4, 5 hours plus of your time for free, a lot of people are willing to do that. And so fundamentally, just think about it like 5 sales calls that you do in a row, except it's really smooth and you're just providing value. And that way, it kind of gets the jitters out for people who've never sold before. And when we actually talk about how to close, I'll cover that in much more detail. But this is the easiest way for people to start. Now, you can pair this with content because then you let people know publicly, hey, I'm doing this thing. Want to hit me up. In fact, I'll put my, hopefully, first post somewhere over here. This is the first post I ever made to promote my business. And it was something called the Free Training Project. And I had already worked with people doing warm outbound for a year at that point. I think I had 13-ish customers, something like that. And then I published their results and I said, hey, if you guys want to work with me, I got a few spots open. And that's what became my first content post to let people know so they could find out about my stuff. Now, over time, I learned how to run paid ads and do cold outbound, which is like calls, emails, DMs to strangers to say, hey, can I give you this amazing offer? And ads work the same way, except we call them up, bring them in, and close them. And if you're starting out, this can seem like a lot of stuff to do. You're like, oh, I'm gonna do all 8. Until you get to $1 million, you can just do one of these. And if you're going to do 2, do content and warm outbound. This is the easiest way to start. It's also the cheapest. Here, you have to have a really good skill set. This is also pretty cheap. It's just harder to do. But if you're gonna do cold outbound, you might as well start with warm. Start with people who aren't strangers and then level up to people who are strangers. But these ones are the least expensive way of getting customers. This is the most expensive, but it scales quickly. So once people have found out about our stuff, great, so now they know, but now we gotta get them to give us money. So now we gotta get them to buy. When I started my gym, I hated the idea of sales. I even had someone say, hey, you're a salesman. And I was like, I was disgusted by the idea. I was like, I'm an academic. And so then I had to pay rent and clearly was like, how do I get these strangers to give me money? And immediately learned sales. Now, over the last 10 plus years, I've done 4,000 plus consults. And it wasn't until I had to transfer that skill of sales to other people that I had to create a framework that was repeatable for other people to also close. I remember the first time I went home for Christmas, I had an employee close their first sale without me. And I got teary because I realized it was the first time that my business could make money without me. And so this is the framework I have, which is closer. And so this is an acronym and it's very simple and it's easy to remember. And the reason that one's smaller is not because R is less important. It's because Amazon, Jeffy B, decided to only send us 5 of the right ones instead of the 6th. So the first of the closer framework is clarify why the person is there. And so fundamentally, the big advantage that we have as a business is that these customers have reached out to us. And so we need to clarify why they even took the time to reach out. Why did you respond to our ad? Why did you respond to my email? Why did you comment on my post? Whatever it is, if you haven't engaged leads, which means that they've responded in some way, then they've taken the first step. In basically every form of advertising, this exists. And most people aren't cold calling and then immediately closing. And so even in that situation, you would call them, set an appointment, and then on the appointment, you would then say, hey, what made you take this appointment? What made this worth it for you? And then what we're doing here is we're clarifying the problem. That leads us to the next letter, which is L, which is label them with the problem. Now that may sound similar, but it's actually very different. So what we're doing is when we label, we say, so it sounds like you are here, you want to get here, and this is the thing that's getting in the way. Does that sound about right? And so what we've done is we've said, this is your current, this is your desired, and we've established a gap and sometimes an obstacle. That's a monster. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to position ourselves as the sword that can kill the monster and ultimately get them to their desired end state. But we can't sell unless we have a gap. And that is why C and L are so important before you get into anything else. So for example, you're 200 pounds, you want to be 150, 50 pounds is the gap. The reason that you're struggling is because you don't know how to work out, you don't know how to eat. Let me see if I can do a spoon here or a fork. There you go. You don't know how to eat, and you have no one who's holding you accountable to making sure that you do these first 2. In a B2B setting, it's like you're doing 10K a month and you want to make 100K a month, and the issue is that you don't have ads that are working, or you don't have enough leads that are coming in. That brings us to the next thing. Once we've clarified we're there, we've clearly labeled them with a problem. You're here, you want to be here, this is the problem. Then you overview past pain. All right, I call this the pain cycle. So you overview past experiences. The reason this is so important is that pain is what motivates action. And so if you think about motivation in general, it's always from deprivation, like I said earlier. So you being overweight and reminding them of how overweight they are and the cost of being overweight this whole time, it basically further brings them this way. It expands the gap between where they are and then where they want to go. And the further that gap is, the bigger the rubber band is. And so remember, this is our amount of deprivation, which is the amount of motivation to get someone to buy. And so when we do the pain cycle, we simply say, what have you done before? How'd that work out for you? And then the pieces that they liked, you compare, you associate with your solution, and the pieces they don't like, you associate with why it didn't work and why your solution is different this time. Once you get to the end of, okay, what'd you do? How'd that work for you? Oh, it's different in this way. Oh, it's similar in this ways. What else have you tried? You keep going through that pain cycle to continue to poke on that pain button, to keep expanding the gap between where they are and where they want to go, and the frustration in the present for not having achieved it. And so once we've overviewed the pain, now we sell the vacation, S. A lot of people, salesmen, this is when salesmen blab. This is when salesmen lose the sale. And the reason they lose the sale is because they just do this massive monologue, and that doesn't work. Instead, what you want to do is come up with what I call a 3-pillar pitch. And each of the pillars is usually 1 or 2 statements and then followed by an analogy or a metaphor. And so you say, hey, if you want to create SEO to get more leads, then it's kind of like, and then we basically make our transition, it's kind of like when you get a paycheck and when you have an investment account. Your paycheck, you work and you get paid every single month, but you put a little bit of that money towards your investment. Over time, that investment compounds until eventually it makes you more than what you make in your active. And so SEO kind of works the same way. Now, realistically, there's really no similarity to getting traffic to a website as there is between paychecks and investment accounts. But it compares something that people understand with something that they don't understand so they can learn. And so fundamentally, you should come up with 3 analogies that explain each of the pillars of what differentiates your solution. If I was selling leads, which I came up with a script for mortgage brokers, it was the leads had to be exclusive, they had to be timely, and they had to be qualified. And so you just say, okay, have you ever got on the phone with somebody who doesn't have money and they're just window browsing? Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Totally, right? And so it's like, cool, you just give an example, you give an analogy that explains it. If it's something easy to understand, examples. If it's something hard to understand, metaphor. And the reason I call it sell the vacation is that you'll notice that I'm not actually explaining much about the product at all. And the main reason is because they care about themselves, they don't care about our product. They care about their problems, not about our product. And the only reason they care about our product is if there's a way that they know with high conviction that's gonna get them to their goal. And so we wanna talk about Maui, we wanna talk about Hawaii, we wanna talk about where they're going, what it's gonna be like when they're at 150. What it's gonna be like when they're making $100,000 a month, not all the steps it's gonna take to get there. We're not talking about TSA. We're not talking about taking your shoes off and sitting next to somebody who stinks and getting on the plane and having bad plane food. Because guess what all of that stuff is? I just gave you an analogy. And so once we've done S, we then go to E, which is explain away their concerns. So at this point, after you've overviewed the pain, you say, hey, I think I might have something for you. Would you like to hear about it? They say yes, and then you go to sell the vacation. Once you've sold the vacation, you ask, you say, you ready to get started? Does that sound good to you? Any kind of closing question you want. Fair enough? Great. Now, if they then say anything but yes, I want to buy, you then go to E, explain away their concerns. And so the way that you explain away their concerns is that typically there's 3 big categories. So people blame their circumstances for why they can't do something. They blame other people for why they can't do something, or they avoid the decision altogether, which is basically blaming themselves. They give their power elsewhere. And so within that, you basically have 6 categories of questions that fall underneath. So 1 is they say they don't have the time. I'm too busy right now. Now's not a good time. The second is they say, I don't have the money to do this right now. This is too expensive. This is outside of my budget. Number 3 is they say somebody else has the decision-making authority, all right? The 4th is they say, I'm not sure this is right for me. This is a fit question, all right? Which is really just means that they have a preference that isn't aligned or that they believe isn't aligned with the product that you sell. Oh, I have to follow a meal plan. I don't want to count calories. 5 is they blame other people's past experiences with them. And so this is one that we overcome with something I call burn you twice, but it's other